Welcome to the Week 6 slate breakdown for FanDuel and DraftKings. I'm your host, Jason Gilbo. With me is Russell Clay at Russell J. Clay, taking a look at each position this week. And interesting week here because I think coming off of an ugly Week 5 where there wasn't a lot of exciting action outside of a few guys, this seems to set up a little bit more for probably a bigger fantasy week.
Week 6? What? Week 6? What? You be the crowd. I'll be the rapper. Week 6?
What?
Week 6?
What?
Yeah, let's go. All right, what were you saying?
A good Week 6 ahead. We got some good games here.
Definitely better than Week 5. We have some nice buys of teams that I've, invested things in that I don't want to invest in, and mainly I'm just thinking of the Seahawks and the Cowboys. The kind of inconsistent passing games that I'm kind of happy when I don't see them on a slate. I'm happy I don't have to play Paul Richardson this week, so things are good.
Yeah. Let's jump into quarterbacks here. Let's dive right in. Let's start with actually just Tom Brady in general. Are you worried about his health? I've seen
No.
the shoulder issue. You're not worried at all?
No, I mean
He's taking a beating.
I feel like the people who are saying that just don't want you to play him against the Jets. So yeah, actually Jets secondary has looked really good this year so far, but they haven't seen this team yet. And Tom Brady's going to throw for 350 to 400 yards and 3 to 4 touchdowns, and then we're going to log out. And he's worth the price on both sites here. I mean, 9,500 again. These pay up quarterbacks have not been hitting at all. Tom Brady hit obviously week 2 and 3, I believe. 4 and 5 didn't go so well. Rodgers, I do not like him at all at 9K on FanDuel. I think you can, look at his weapons here and say, all right, is Jordy Nelson fully healthy? No. Is Randall Cobb a guy that can lead, the Packers offense to get Aaron Rodgers to that 350, 400 against the tough Vikings defense? I don't love it. Devontae Adams, maybe he's the guy, but I know I kind of just jumped to Rodgers, but I think Brady's pretty straightforward. As long as he's playing, I'm in. I don't care if he's hurt. Rodgers, not so much, though.
Yeah, I'm not particularly thrilled with Rodgers this week either. I like Brady. I'm kind of intrigued with Drew Brees at home, actually. This week in more of a tournament move because I don't think you need to go to him in cash games. I think there's some cheaper options we'll get to, mainly a Deshaun Watson. But Drew Brees here, I mean, you look at the Vegas total, it's fairly high, 27.25 implied total at home against Detroit, who have been, their defense has been pretty solid this year. But when you look at Brees, I mean, second highest completion percentage, he's completing 75% of his passes behind Alex Smith, obviously. 10th in points per drop back. I don't mind him here in this spot at home. I can definitely see the 300-yard passing attack, just given the fact that offense is how it rolls. It looks like they're going to get Willie Snead back. I think that's a big bump for him. He's got another weapon outside of Thomas because we've really kind of clearly – he hasn't had that this year. I mean, we're starting to see him use Kamara out of the backfield a little bit more, which I like. I like the fact that AP's gone. So I like Brees and GPPs this week. I think a lot of people will kind of go and look back at last year when he put up a dud against Detroit at home late in the year at home, and people were pissed. So I kind of like him. I don't think he's going to be incredibly high owned just because I don't think people are going to be actually paying up. And if they are, it's probably going to be for Brady.
So I like that call, but I'm thinking it might be the first Matt Ryan game of the year. You kind of look at Miami's defense and the way they're built. They've been destroying the run so far this year and struggling a little bit against the pass. Maybe we start to see some of those touchdowns be passing touchdowns instead of, Devontae Freeman just eating up all the fantasy points. If that's the case, we might see a big Julio game, if he's we always got to check the injury report. If he's practicing this week, though, I certainly think Matt Ryan's a guy who's going to be, especially on FanDuel, underrated. With Watson there, with Stafford and Breeze and Brady, and some of the cheaper options. I think Matt Ryan's going to be a guy you can get a pretty good deal on. Kirk Cousins as well is in play. could be an 8%, Matt Ryan tournament week, and I'm loving that. The offense has regressed, but I don't think in the way or as much as people are perceiving right now. So I think this could be a big Matt Ryan game.
I don't know. I like that call, and you mentioned Cousins as well, because when we look at I think those three guys, Breeze, Cousins, Ryan, they're going to come in at lower ownership. I think if Stafford's fully healthy, he'll get some looks, just given the fact that he's playing the Saints, and obviously Watson at home against Cleveland, who have allowed the fourth most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks this year, and just basically his recent play, he's going to draw a ton of the ownership. So I like that call. I like the Ryan call. I do like Cousins as well. You're starting to see San Francisco's secondary really struggle. They were held it together the first 2 weeks, and they've kind of really let go. I mean, Brissett just threw for 300 plus yards against them. So Washington at home, I like Cousins. He's probably more of a solo play. Like, I don't see myself stacking. I mean, outside of maybe Terrell Pryor, but like outside of that, I don't know if you're like stacking anyone with Cousins.
No, unless Jordan Reed, he's going to play. But if he somehow doesn't play, someone kidnaps him, Vernon Davis again. But I don't think that's going to happen. Lower priced, mid-priced options. Don't love the mid-range. I think you just pay up. If you're looking at the mid-range. Carson Palmer in play, Josh McCown in play again against New England. Other than that, I mean, are you playing Roethlisberger against the Chiefs?
Nope.
So I think he's in play. I don't love it, obviously, in KC. I think you can play Martavis.
See, I'll play the weapons. I'm not playing Roethlisberger. That's how I kind of go with him.
I think you can do a Steelers, onslaught this week without the defense. Maybe go Roethlisberger, Bell, Brown, Bryant. But other than that, it's been a struggle for Ben this year. So I think playing the weapons might be the safer way to go. Go with another quarterback. Like Jared Goff, Trevor Siemian, Alex Smith against a pretty good Steelers secondary. Rivers against Oakland is in play, I guess.
Yeah, he's in play. I kind of do like McCown. Like, I kind of like the Jets a little bit this week, just like garbage time mode probably, or just maybe getting after this New England defense and probably maybe even keeping it a game. That's a stretch. I do like Carson Palmer. He's had 33 passing attempts inside opponents' 20 this year.
Yeah.
Like, they've been so bad inside the red zone. They've just been awful. They've shot themselves in the foot. They've dropped passes. Like, there's going to be a little bit of positive regression, I think, in terms of touchdowns for Palmer. So I don't mind him this week. He's super cheap on FanDuel. I mean, he's 7,100. DK, he's a little bit priced up, but I don't mind him. I'm with you, though. I think the mid-range of like Watson, Cousins, Stafford, those types of guys are just kind of going to be where I'm sitting. And then because there's hedge plays off those popular guys, like we've already mentioned with Breeze and Ryan and Cousins.
I do have one punt quarterback, Kevin Hogan. He is 4,600 on DK, 6,100 on FD. Running machine. If you saw him and how they used him last year and early this year, they kind of just put him in there on plays and like ran him like an option quarterback. And he played pretty well last year, got that offense moving. Houston lost Watt, and if Merciless doesn't play, he's definitely in play if you want to just pay up everywhere else. Obviously not someone you're getting exposure to. 20 lineups, I think you can definitely throw him in one.
All right. I'm not against that. I like a good punt quarterback every now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone you're just completely off of this week? I mean, outside of Rodgers.
Yeah, the punt quarterbacks other than Hogan, Goff, Trubisky, Hoyer, pretty much all those guys. The Vikings quarterbacks, I'm just not playing them. I don't think there's any need to play Winston this week. No need to play Alex Smith or Stafford. I mean, I'm just not trusting Stafford. I think we saw last week with Bradford a great example of a quarterback playing hurt. You always have that risk of a quarterback playing hurt, and then he just doesn't have it, especially in lower body injuries like legs and hamstrings and stuff like that. I just don't want to. There's just no need to play Stafford this week. You can. I mean, if you want to go tournament-wise, I'm just not going to be playing him.
See, I'm gonna have a share of Stafford. I actually kind of like Winston at 6,200 on DK. FanDuel, not so much. He's intriguing. Like they're airing the ball out a ton. 46, 38, 40 attempts his last three games. 300 plus yards in all three, and that 300-yard bonus definitely helps him if he can get to that point. Um, we kind of look at this Arizona secondary. They're getting shredded outside of Patrick Peterson. Like I'm loving Djax this week. I think Cameron Brake can get on the action too. So like I'm kind of intrigued. And we saw last year. I mean, we'll talk about Mike Evans here in a little bit, but I kind of like Winston. You know, even on the road in Arizona, I know it's kind of a perceived tough matchup, but I don't think it's as bad as what people think it is.
Fair enough. I'm not going to be playing him, but I think that's a fair call. And that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah. Let's move into running backs. Let's focus on this top tier here first. You know, it's basically, you know, I think there's three guys that are kind of the tier one. This week it's Bell, you know, Fournette, Kareem Hunt. Fournette against that Rams rush defense that obviously Seattle just hasn't been able to run the ball all year. They looked fine last week, but this is a different animal here. Good offensive line, Fournette. I think we talked 30 minutes on Leonard Fournette before the show.
Yeah, man, that lower body is just something else. I mean, since Charles Barkley, we haven't seen a dude built like this. And I make that silly comparison, but I mean, he is just stronger than everyone else on the field. And it's fairly obvious. Dude's 22 years old, and he's just the toughest guy on the field. That's just the way he's always been, and it's going to be how he continues. They're going to run him into the ground. I don't think he's going to have a long career, but it's going to be pretty special these next few years. And I will just say, so a Russ Kareem Hunt take. I've been playing fantasy football for 12 years now. And there's certain guys when you fade them in redraft and you just watch them every game and you kind of like sit back in your seat every carry and you're like, no, don't do anything. And you're like so happy when they get stopped. I mean, I faded Kareem Hunt this year. Not fully. I had a few shares in Dynasty, but this guy is so good. And you know by the way you react, like there's such little chance of him failing like with this role. He's just so good. And do you know what I'm saying? Like when you fade a guy and you just watch him and you're like, oh yeah, I have to get super lucky for this guy not to be successful. Like he's just so good in this spot. And they're giving him so many touches now. It's like, oh my God.
It's like I feel that more with wide receivers. Like the wide receivers that are getting 12, 10, 15 targets a game, and you fade them 1 week or you're playing up against them and you're hoping that like they only catch 6 of their 15 targets for 80 yards and that's it. Like I know what you mean. I love Kareem Hunt this week alone, just as a play in terms of playing against Pittsburgh. Like you said, I mean, just the Andy Reid offense, we've seen the touches, really work out, especially in the second half, things tend to pick up. I think he's, essentially game script proof. We saw Kendrick West, 2 touchdowns. He's going to get back to the point where he's still putting up good yardage a game, like he's going to be fine after 2 weeks. Kareem Hunt's going to be fine.
those two Kendrick West touchdowns were almost a positive, like even though they were terrible for Kareem Hunt in that game, but it's almost like, Jesus, man, this offense is ridiculous. And Alex Smith not going to be able to pass as easy. I know Chris Conley wasn't a big thing, in that offense, but he was a guy that was getting 40 to 50 yards a game. We'll see how they deal with that situation. Teams are obviously going to focus on Tyreek Hill. Travis Kelce kind of banged up. So this can be a running first attack. They're going to do those little bootleg, like little pass thingies that might see a little more DeAnthony Thomas this week if Kelsey's banged up. So it's going to be those short things. And then, Pittsburgh hasn't been great against the run this year. Obviously, that Fournette game is averaging out that, but we're talking too much about Kareem Hunt. Great play. So, yeah.
Do you want to talk the other side of that one? I like Bell. I think Bell's always the guy you get somewhat exposure to.
Especially after last week.
Yeah, I think, we've kind of had like some buy low opportunities. I don't know if this week's going to be tremendously one, but I kind of like I like Hunt and Fournette more than Bell this week. I'm still going to get my exposure, but he's going to be one of those guys where I just probably don't plug and play like I did last week.
Yeah, fair enough. I like Bell. I think he's cash play. I actually do like him more than Fournette. Fournette's expensive enough now where um, I don't have to worry about the price discrepancy. So I
Mhm.
like Bell more this week just because of I know the receiving, even on FanDuel, the receiving, I know it's point 0.5, but if he gets 7, 8 catches, that's 4 points. So I like that floor there for him for sure.
Yeah. As far as the middle tier goes, I mean, Gurley, Freeman, Melvin Gordon. I like Gurley as a GPP play this week because I still think Jacksonville. We were talking Jacksonville's defense. We expect them to kind of average out against the run at some point this year, but they're still bad. Like they're still haven't figured things out yet, and it was just mainly Pittsburgh being idiots last week with their game plan that kind of led Bell to have the down week.
So my kind of plan this week, I like Gordon and Gurley. Don't really love Freeman, as I mentioned. Miami's been good against the run. CJ Anderson, you can get a shot with, and then I'm kind of not in love with a lot of these options. I think you can play Doug Martin. I think Jordan Howard's an interesting guy for sure at his price. But like Carlos Hyde, Amir Abdullah. Uh, I mean, they're okay. I'm not going to be as in love with them as I am the top options. And I think people are going to fall in love with the mid range and kind of ignore the ceiling of the top end guys, which is like 30 points. You know what I mean? Like, I like Abdullah. He can get you 15 to 20 points even on FanDuel, but he's not getting you 30, and that's where like that 10 points, especially in a GPP, is it's scary to fade the entire front tier there, especially with OBJ dead and all those, you know.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different story on DraftKings. I kind of like. I think you can take a little bit more shots with those guys like Abdullah and Gillisley, Ellington, Duke Johnson, those types of guys. Like I'm okay with them on DK. Lamar Miller is intriguing on FanDuel at 6,800. You mentioned CJ Anderson. I like CJ Anderson a lot this week at 7K. This is a guy who, he's had a predominantly heavy workload throughout the year. He's had 20 plus rushing attempts in 3 or 4 games. He's getting a couple targets here and there. The end zone really hasn't been found outside that game against Dallas, but this Giants team, I just think they're going to be absolutely implode after last week if they haven't already. And just at home, CJ Anderson's always been a better play, so I like him. I kind of like Abdullah this week in GPPs. You mentioned he's not a huge ceiling guy because the red zone touches aren't there. But I think there's some potential in this game that could, not get out of hand scoring wise, but I think there's definitely some promising plays in this game alone.
Kamara seems like the free square to me on DK 4,500 in that
Mhm.
same Ellington role. That's kind of my move. We were talking about Elijah McGuire before the pod. I think he's a really interesting guy. If Powell, is still limited, McGuire's a guy. He obviously broke that big touchdown a few weeks ago. Very productive college player. Had a sort of mediocre senior and junior season, but was really special his first 2 years in college. I don't think that can be ignored. So I think there are pay down options. Like you mentioned, DK, a little different story because of PPR. But on FanDuel, kind of what I'm talking about, the first few weeks, it's been like if you didn't have Fournette, last week, or you didn't have some of those top options, it's kind of like you can't really win a GPP without them.
Yeah, like those guys, when their ceilings are like 17, 18 on FanDuel, like it's a decent score for an RB2, but like you said, like when that next tier is scoring 25 plus, it's such a
Yeah.
dramatic difference to make up. So yeah, I agree. Um, like I said, DK is a little bit different. Like Duke Johnson, Andre Ellington are great PPR guys. I think you can still continue to play those two backs. What do you think of Jared McKinnon this week? Obviously, coming off a big Monday night game. Packers defense on the road. They haven't been bad against the run, obviously, so I think I do worry about him a little bit.
This is a bittersweet moment for me because I've been a Jerick McKinnon truther for a while now, at least 3 years since his rookie year. Super athletic, super special in terms of, spark score. We've seen it before, guys. We've seen this happen. We've seen him have a random big game a few times before. We've seen him hit those big runs before. It does not translate over a 16-game schedule. I love him. I think he's going to be in the league for a lot of years. He's not a feature back. He's not a guy who's going to put up 20 points a week. He's just not. He's not Dalvin Cook. Could he hit this week? Maybe, but I like the the Packers run D, and we had all last year. He had all last year to emerge. If he had emerged last year, they wouldn't have drafted Dalvin. They really wouldn't have. And he's viable. He's not what people are going to be hyping him up to be, though. He's not. Sorry, guys. I'm a Jarek truther. I've tried to hype him up before, and you just get left with, breadcrumbs. You get that touchdown every 5 weeks, and you're like, oh, he's back. You get that 30-yard run, and you're like, oh, see, it's happening. And then it just doesn't happen every time. I mean, we're in year 4 now, guys. Year 4 of being.
Hey, Russ, I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to pull the bottle away from the table here and get you off McKinnon. Oh man, let's talk wide receivers here because we're gonna end on McKinnon. Top tier this week. We're kind of looking at some injuries. I mean, really, Julio Jones banged up, Stephon Diggs, Jordy Nelson, Devontae Parker. I mean, not that Parker's in that same tier, but we're kind of looking at some injuries. Antonio Brown against KC. I definitely don't mind him. I think KC's secondary.
Mike Evans against Peterson.
So let's talk about him. He saw no. Let's talk about him real quick. He saw 18 targets last time against Arizona.
Okay.
No one has seen more than 5 targets this year against Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
No one that he's shadowed has seen more than 5 targets against. He absolutely limits. And I'm kind of curious to see if Winston, another year in here, is going to figure out that Evans isn't going to be the guy to go to. I mean, Evans still produced. Evans' price has dropped significantly on DraftKings, where he's 6,900. I don't think he's completely off the table, but he's like one of those single bullet guys that I might have. I might actually target Patrick Peterson with Evans this week once.
Phew. Nope, not me. I'm all set. But I will say Deshaun Jackson, kind of worried about that wrist injury. But if he's good to go and he practices, then all systems go. I think he's pretty much a lock this week. With the archetypes of wide receivers that have been beating the Cardinals,
Jackson's been that guy.
I just think that's pretty automatic. So I like him a lot. As far as the top end guys, I think Antonio Brown, even at 9,300, if you want to pay up at wide receiver, I'm not going to stop you. So, I mean, you look at what he did against that Jags secondary. Roethlisberger was terrible. AB was AB. So, pretty easy there. As I mentioned, I love Matt Ryan this week, but it might not be Julio. I might just play naked Matt Ryan. I like Julio, but I am a little worried. I am going to get exposure because, as I mentioned, I do like Matt Ryan, but I'm not going all in on Julio.
Yeah, I'm with you. Another guy that's up, Michael Thomas is the second most expensive wide receiver on FanDuel this week, which I find odd. He's been around that 90-yard mark and a touchdown over the last 2 weeks, but I don't want that at 85. I need more. If he sees Darius Slay, I'm kind of off of Michael Thomas, and I kind of might focus a little bit more on like Kamara and maybe even a Fleener, Share, and Snead if he's in. Because Slay's another guy I just kind of tend to stay away from a little bit. Not that Thomas is a bad play. I think he's a little bit easier to play over on DraftKings where he's 73. But FanDuel, 85 just seems really expensive for his upside. I mean, I know, solid wide receiver, but I can't really get behind him at his price. I'd rather go DeAndre Hopkins for $500 less, or Cooks or Tate or Hogan, those types of guys.
Hopkins is a guy where he's expensive enough now you can fade him. I think likely we're not looking at 3 touchdowns every week. I think we're kind of looking at 80 yards, maybe 1 touchdown, or 120 yards or something like that. Obviously, Watson's been airing it out. He's at the price where you can fade him now. I think he's priced accurately. So it's kind of like a 50-50 on whether he hits that value. Certainly worth it. I kind of, would much rather just pay down and get one of the top running backs instead of Hopkins, but understand if you want to go there. We talked about Cooks earlier this week. I don't know if we mentioned it on salary exploitation, but there's got to be a point where teams start realizing Chris Hogan's a major weapon in that offense. And Morris Claiborne's been shutting dudes down in that Jets secondary. If Cooks is kind of not ignored, but they put less emphasis on him this week, if Gronk plays, could be an interesting Cooks week against this Jets secondary that's actually been pretty good. But this could be the week, Yeah,
the Cooks week is, there's going to be a big Cooks week at some point here.
There's going to be 3 to 4 Cooks weeks this year.
Yeah.
You got to nail it,
I mean, when you look at his, 12.2 yards per target, 21 yards per catch, I mean, there's big plays here that are bound to be coming. I mean, he's out there. It's kind of like Martavis Bryant, where like we've seen a couple of deep balls just narrowly sail over, like just reach out of Cook's hands. Like, I'm not touching him in cash games, but I like him in GPPs.
Mm-hmm.
Yahoo, I mean, once again, he's extremely cheap. But I think FanDuel and DraftKings, I just think tournaments is where you're best reserved because – he's still kind of on the expensive side here. We saw Keenan Allen drop down in price. He's only 72 this week on FanDuel. I know he's not the PPR site there, but I kind of like him against this Oakland secondary that's really tend to struggle. Crabtree, Devontae Adams, like we need to see who Xavier Rhodes follows first, and with Jordy Nelson's health. But there's a decent range here on FanDuel where I don't think like you said, you don't necessarily need to go up all the way because you can kind of focus on that range of top-end running backs.
Yeah, Golden Tate's okay for me. They do have Lattimore now for the Saints, who's kind of looking like a pretty promising young cornerback. But I don't know if he's going to follow Tate. If Stafford's hurt, I'm probably not going to play him. But even in a situation where there's a backup, Tate has upside in PPR and DK. Not so much on FanDuel. I think he's a pretty easy fade there. Totally done with Miami until further notice. Landry and Parker, I'm not doing either. If they hit, I'm just going to take the L. In the next few weeks, but I need to see something first. Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph with no Diggs, kind of, I know Diggs is going to play, but clearly he was not healthy by the way they used Rudolph in the second half. I think we're going to be looking at that in this game.
I like Thielen. I like Thielen and Cobb just in terms of, both those guys. I think more so on PPR sites with Thielen, but I don't mind him still on FanDuel because he's cheap. But that game, I don't think there's a lot of potential on the Minnesota side. I think Thielen's probably my favorite option, which is weird to say, but that's just because I think that, if there's a primary focus on Diggs or if the focus is with Diggs being out, Thielen becomes that guy. And I just think when you look at it, I mean, Green Bay I expect to be up even on the road. So if they can jump out, it might create a favorable spot for guys like Thielen, who just, they kind of abort that running game and kind of go through the short passing game as their run games on early downs. So I don't mind him. And I just think when we get lower, there's kind of a lot of guys that I don't love as much. I think Thielen, Cobb, Terrell Pryor, Devontae Adams are kind of that drop off.
So I look at Will Fuller as an interesting guy because people are definitely going to be calling for regression, as they should, after 4 touchdowns in 2 games. However, Cleveland, relatively exploitable, and Hopkins going to be taking all the attention. Watson isn't afraid to throw it deep. Will Fuller is a great deep ball wide receiver. He could hit again. I think where Texans are going to see their passing regression is a little later in the year when they get some tougher matchups. I think it could keep rolling for another week here. So I'm not afraid to play Will Fuller at all.
No, I don't mind him. So we talked to Mari Cooper on side exploitation as a potential GPP shot. Casey Hayward, maybe a likely shadow candidate for him, which kind of takes him off of me. And I think that puts a little bit more of my emphasis on Crabtree. My emphasis would completely go away if Derek Carr isn't starting, though. So I don't mind Crabtree this week. Obviously, that's something that we'll talk about in the wide receiver cornerback pod. But outside of that, though, like, do you have any interest in like the Jets wide receivers or like Taylor Gabriel? I kind of like Taylor Gabriel with Sanu out. I mean, he clearly had more of a different role in that matchup against Detroit. Struggled against Buffalo, but I think that was just more because Buffalo's defense is actually strong.
See, I'm going Hooper there, but I understand why Taylor Gabriel would be. I think they're both in play, but I think it's going to be one of those guys that blows up. I don't know who it is, but as I mentioned, if I'm not getting full Julio exposure, I'm going to be getting one of those guys in my Matt Ryan lineups. So, certainly viable. I'm going with Martavis again. I mean, I got to see it through at this stage. I've been playing him. It hasn't been hitting, but it's one of those things where you just have to see it through at this point. It's going to happen. So, a better matchup than last week, obviously. I think it could definitely hit this week, and he's just getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So still has big upside there.
Yeah. And, I think when we look, do you like Willie Snead if he plays and is 100%? I mean, 4,700 on DK, I think is somewhat intriguing.
It's intriguing. I don't know. That's a tough situation to gauge. I'm kind of staying away from it this week. I kind of want to see how this week goes. If you want to get ahead of the curve, I think it's certainly a way to do that. I'm not jumping on that this week, though.
Yeah. Outside of those guys, I mean, Jets guys like Jermaine Kearse, Robbie Anderson against this Pats secondary that's clearly struggled. Do you have any interest in them as kind of like more, gameplay guys that you can go with, if they're down?
You mentioned ASJ and salary exploitation.
He's the guy.
Yeah, Robbie Anderson, they've kind of been beat deep. He's that guy that is going to beat him deep. So, yeah, I mean, I'm in on McCown again. I think you can I kind of played it last week where I did full ASJ with McCown and then mixed in Kearse and Robbie Anderson. I think you can do that again and get some high-end lineups. So, certainly viable there. Arizona receivers obviously in play again at their prices. JJ Nelson, kind of the guy I'm looking at, and Fitzgerald, obviously. So could be a big week for them.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Outside of those guys, I think that's pretty much it. Tyreek Hill, Pierre Garçon are kind of guys we glossed over. Any interest in those two?
Pierre Garçon's okay. I like him, but yeah, it's mostly just sticking to those other guys. I don't really see. I mean, Baltimore at home, I really do think Flacco's starting to get it going here. I don't think they're viable this week, but I do think it's something to be very keen on to see how that passing game continues to evolve. If Flacco's healthy again, then Mike Wallace and Macklin are going to become tournament guys again, and you might get a week ahead of everyone else. So something to watch. It was Wallace last week. Just be aware.
Let's move into tight ends here. When you look at things overall, guys are pretty banged up. Gronkowski obviously missed last week. He had, 10 days to recover. Travis Kelce dealt with a concussion. Jordan Reed dealing with a rib issue. I mean, these are all kind of guys that are a little bit maybe high risk, high reward this week. And especially on a week where I still don't plan on paying up at tight end all that much. We don't have Zach Ertz there. We talked about ASJ. I think ASJ is kind of a safe middle range plug and play for me. Because I just don't think if this is a week that sets up for me to pay up for a Kelce or pay up for a Gronk or, Reed at 5K if he's 100% healthy is somewhat intriguing on DraftKings. But, FanDuel, we're not really getting a huge discount at 65. I think he's, for his production this year and what he's done really maybe over the last 7 or 8 games going last year, I don't think he's quite deserving at 65. So, I don't know. I think ASJ, I think, maybe some of these lower end guys like a Fleener or maybe a Rudolph are kind of more in play.
So I look at Evan Ingram coming off a 0, and I say they could be down by a lot of points by the end of that game. Obviously, it didn't pay off last week, but he's going to be in the game plan this week. And of all the things in the Denver defense, I think we could see, 6 catches from Ingram. Obviously, that's more of a DK thing. I think Austin Hooper and Austin Hooper's really the guy I'm looking at on FanDuel, 4,800. I think that's really cheap against Miami, who's been exploited in the past. Kyle Rudolph, I think you really have to keep a close eye on what Stephon Diggs does in practice this week, because in the second half of that game, it was pretty clear Rudolph was a main. They changed their identity. Rudolph became basically the main weapon other than Thielen. So I think he could be a great deal if Diggs is still hurt.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think I think Rudolph's in play. I like Austin Hooper. I mean, I think the price tag is not bad. Like 3,500 on DraftKings. What was he? 48 on FanDuel.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's decent price tags for a guy who saw 7 targets last week. Obviously Jones left early in that one, so Sanu's been banged up. But I mean, really outside of Jones probably more likely to play, but Sanu probably on the doubtful side. I think if Jones was out, we'd probably have a lot more interest in guys like Gabriel and even Tevin Coleman. Coleman clearly has a role in this passing game when those guys are banged up. So
Coleman always in play, even against tough defenses. The guy that's going to get tough shut
even
down
on bye weeks,
tough.
Coleman's in play.
Huh?
Bye weeks.
Well, yes. But like the run Ds are going to shut down Freeman, like the good run Ds. Coleman's like this weird role where it's like, yeah, they have a good run D, but he's going to be getting dump offs and weird stuff, so I don't know. I don't really love him this week, but I agree, if Julio's missing practices, it's going to be those types that are going to hit if Matt Ryan hits. So
yeah, and I'm going to take a shot with Coby Fleener this week. Detroit 28th in DVOA against tight ends, 12th most fantasy points per game allowed. Fleener's kind of gotten hit and miss here and there. I think that's what we're going to get from him all year long. I just think at his price tag, it's not bad. 5,100 on FanDuel is not out of the question. He's 32 on DraftKings. I just think when you look at tight end this week, it's not really a promising feature. Yeah. David Njoku, he's had one red zone touchdown, but 3 touchdowns. He's clearly a guy they kind of look at for guys in the end zone, basically because they don't have anyone. He's bare min. I mean, he's 3K on DraftKings. I'm not against it from a team that's probably going to be playing down from the very start. I think he's maybe a sneaky play actually this week if you just kind of hope for like 40 yards and a touchdown and a couple of catches.
It's a shame they only use him in the red zone. That's basically how I'm looking at it. Like, he's a good player. If they expand his role as the season goes on, you could be onto something here. Maybe this is the week they start to realize, all right, he's basically our best offensive weapon. Let's, make him a feature guy. So I hope that happens. Certainly with his price, he's viable. These touchdowns could definitely continue with his skill level.
Yeah. And are you paying up for anyone up top? We kind of skipped over that. I don't think
if Kelsey plays, you can think about it. But man, that's scary. If he takes any big hit early, he's going to be out of that game. And I went through that with Devontae Parker last week, so it's not fun, guys.
Yeah, I think these guys are kind of overpriced for their risk take. I mean, GPPs, I think you can look at all 3. But I think that's kind of where I only stand with them.
Yep.
So let's move to defense. This is a spot where, we got some good options up top and probably only good options up top. At least that's my take on this week. Denver, Houston, I think Atlanta's in play. Jacksonville, Baltimore. These guys are all top-end options, I think, that you can look at. I mean, you're not getting a discount on any of them, but these are just simply the better matchups.
I love the way you kind of framed that. You kind of said it like they're like mountain lions, like stalking their prey. This is going to be ugly. for some of these, like Miami against Atlanta. Atlanta's the type of team that it could just be a 3 interception, 2 pick six type of game for Cutler. Like they get pressure, and they have dudes like Keanu Neal who are just gonna bash whoever's catching the ball. Could be really ugly. We've already seen what the Jags can do. If Jared Goff keeps throwing those deep passes like he has been, could be another pick six week. I like the Ravens against Chicago. Obviously, the run D is a problem, but they're at home. Could be an interesting result there. Trubisky obviously made a few mistakes. And then Broncos, man, I think you just pay up. Right? I think you just that's just what you do, like cash, and you just don't have to worry about that, you know?
I think if there was a least favorite out of this top tier, it's probably Houston at this point, just given the fact that their injuries. I don't think Houston's going to struggle defensively this week. I still think there's that potential, but I don't think it's actually – it may not be as great. I mean, they've had a couple of defensive touchdowns this year to kind of bail them out, but I mean –
I think people are going to be surprised with Kevin Hogan, man. I think Kaiser was just that bad. I really do.
Yeah, so. Could very well be. So is Green Bay even in play on the road? I kind of like them as like when we start to break down these cheaper options. The Packers are only 2,800. I think they're somewhat intriguing. You mentioned the Bucks on salary exploitation. I'm taking a shot at basically getting the pick six from Palmer, maybe getting off that line a little bit. Like outside of those two, I think below 3K on DraftKings, I don't really see anyone else that I'm particularly in love with. No. Outside of really the Bucks and Packers.
Yeah, I think that's the way you have to play it. I'm pretty much going with if EJ Manuel starts, I'll play defenses against him. Chargers are – so I think you could definitely do that. But I think paying up is the way to go this week. There's a lot of weak defenses this year. Somehow the passing games aren't taking advantage of that, but – like we kind of broke it down, Broncos, Falcons, Jags. I think you could definitely go with all those. Rams are always that weird. They have like random 25-point weeks. I don't love them this week, but you could play them in a tournament if you want. But I'd stick to those top three that we mentioned.
Yeah, I don't mind the Jags either.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the ones I was talking about.
I mean, most sacks in the NFL, they're the highest scoring defense. Obviously, coming off last week, but you look at the prior weeks, they've had some monster games. 2 28 DK point games this year already. Like that's astounding for a fantasy defense. So I think they're very intriguing. And like you said, Falcons, Broncos are just. I'm surprised you didn't say they're going to go in and just take Eli's lunch money because that's usually your go-to line.
Yeah, it would be normally, but I just love Keanu Neal so much. As anytime the Falcons D gets mentioned, I just get excited for him. So he's like the Leonard Fournette of defense. He just mashes people in the face. I love it. So that's all I got.
Yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up. I mean, a decent week. I think our overall line construction, I think just given the fact that what we focused on, it's kind of a pay up at running back week. We're looking at those mid-range quarterbacks, but I think you can kind of go different directions in GPP. It's a good GPP week because we mentioned a fair amount of shots that you can take with some of those guys.
Absolutely.
So any further words for you?
No further words. I think Matt Ryan's a pretty interesting dude this week. I think against those other top quarterbacks could be a fun one.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's going to wrap it up for us. You can check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all the great tools and content that are rolling out throughout the week. And once again, if you like what we're doing here on this pod, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. And good luck in week 6.